Good morning, everyone. Today's going to be a little bit of a slower class. I want to go into some foam roller work. Really kind of diving in a little bit deeper into methodology of how I incorporate the foam roller with a movement assessment. The general idea here is kind of doing alignment work, similar to working on the alignment in your car. Today we're going to be focused largely on the shin box position. And so thinking of alignment through the hips, we have how we balance tension through right side to left side, forward to backwards. There's also spiral, rotational movements through that translate through the legs, through the knees, down to the feet. Going to use the shin box as an assessment to really feel where things feel less mobile and more tight, those being two distinctly different things, and what to do when we feel them, how to incorporate foam roller, then coming back and reassessing the movement. When we see that we got better balance, then we get to feed the neurology of that better balance with good movement. So with all that, let's get started. So I want to start in a tall kneel position and kind of working from tall kneel into our deep kneel, either with the feet, ankles flat to the floor or with the toes tucked. Getting a sense for how deep can you get your hips to your heels? Are you able to get all the way down without it being stressful on the knees or the quads? If you are able to get all the way down, getting a sense for like just general tension in the quads, around the knees, around the ankles, noticing if there's a difference right side to left side. And while we're kind of exploring these positions, hands can come down on the floor to transition in and out. If this is a difficult position to work on, you can keep your hands on the floor throughout. Just simply rocking back hips to heels, coming back up. And again, I kind of want to play with alternating from ankles flat to the floor to toes tucked. And the main thing is, again, getting that nice general assessment for where you feel tension in the body, or specifically around the hips, thighs, and knees. And then we're going to come up into our tall half kneel, and I want to get into some crocodile breath to use as our guide of how we're going to breathe through the rest of the session. So making nice C shapes with our hands, placing the hands below the ribs and above the pelvic bone in that nice, soft, meaty space around the abdominal walls. Index fingers are pressing into the front, so I can get a little bit of pressure on my abdominals. Side of the palms are pressing into the side body space. I want to press inward, and then the thumbs are pressed into the low back lightly. So we're kind of getting a nice little clamping down with our hands. On the inhale, I want to fill up that space like a balloon, expanding out in all directions. On the exhale, we're drawing our navel up and in towards the spine. And as we exhale, allow your hands to squeeze a little bit tighter in order to create more resistance for your inhale to press into. And we'll take a good 5, 6 deep breaths, slowly deeper breaths. So I want to start shallow and then work a little bit more on each one to really fill up that abdominal wall so that by the time you're on your last breath, you're getting a full deep breath as big as you can all the way in and a full exhale as far as you can all the way out. Again, with each exhale, squeeze the hands a little more and see if you can feel even expansion. Index fingers, side palms, thumbs, that balloon pressing out in all directions. Notice if where that breath goes easier. It should go forward into the abdominals, into the index fingers a little easier. It may be more challenging to get to breathe out to the side or into the low back. And even more importantly, you may notice that it's more difficult to breathe specifically into one side. Maybe you can breathe better into that right side low back, but it does not fill up the left side low back. That's really, really important to take notice of. And if you have an area where it's not moving, it's not expanding out like a balloon, you can say it's that low back area. You can stick your thumb in there and wiggle a little bit in order to give a cue into that muscle, and then very intentionally breathe in and try to fill up that space with your breath, kind of like you're shining a spotlight into that pressure and pushing that area out. See if you can get it to just move even a little bit. And then we're slowly going to come down into onto our bottoms, into a reverse sit position. I want to continue to breathe, inflating out into that crocodile breath. Exhale, drawing navel into spine. And we're going to explore our shin box, kind of going from doing our windshield wipers. As you exhale, allow the knees to rotate towards one side. See how far you can go without going into pain. I want to make sure that we don't have pain on the knees. If you're able to get into this full position, great. We're going to come all the way up and across to the other side. Again, inhale, crocodile breath as you come to center. Exhale, drawing navel into spine as you roll the knees over. Only take the knees as far as you can without pain. I want to get into assessment mode here. I want to feel where do you feel tightness and tension, and where does it feel different on one side compared to the other? And let me be very clear on what I mean by one side. When my right knee is down, this is my right side shin box. I want to feel, how does my right hip feel on the right side shin box? I want to feel, how does my left hip feel on my right side shin box? When we come to the other side, this is the left side shin box. How does the right hip or the left hip feel on left side shin box? And how does the right hip feel on the left side shin box? I want to compare, how does this back hip feel on my left side compared to how does the left hip feel on the right side? Or how does the front hip feel on the right side compared to the front hip on the left side? So as we're going back and forth, areas that I really want to feel into are the front of this back hip, kind of getting into this space, anterior hip. I want to feel the glute or the back of the front hip. So on my left side shin box, I want to feel the glute on my left hip and the anterior hip of my right hip. I also want to notice, how does the back feel? I'm taking a little bit longer time going through this as we go back and forth, because I really want you to get a sense for, where does it feel different on the right side compared to the left side? More than likely, you're going to notice that the back hip, the anterior part of the back hip on one side is tighter than it is when you go to the other side. Or you may notice that your low back is a little tighter. Or you may notice that the adductor space, the groin area on this back hip, is a little tighter. So really get that sense of which side feels a little bit more challenging to get into, which side feels a little tighter. That's the side I want to start on. So for me, when my left side shin box, this feels pretty good, mild tension, but nothing that speaks out. When I come to my right side shin box, my left hip feels a lot tighter, anterior compartment and adductor space. So this is the side that I want to begin with. I'm going to bring our outside hand ground to the floor, spiraling that elbow out. And the first thing we're working on is opening up that back knee, lifting it up towards the ceiling, nice and slow, seeing how high can you open that hip. We're going to inhale as we drop, exhale, drawing the navel into the spine as you open and lift. Feel that tension. This feels very, very tight. I have not moved yet today. So I have very little range on this side. We're gonna do about 5 reps, and then we're gonna switch to the other side. Again, I wanna get a good sense of comparison. So I've done my 5, I'm moving to the other side, grounding palm, spiraling that elbow out to lift up the sternum tall, and then exhale as we open up that back hip. Now I have significantly more mobility. I can go farther in my range, and it does not feel as tight. So my left hip feels tighter in this movement. If you're not sure which side feels tighter, then I want you to go back and forth between the sides, doing 1 to 3 reps, back and forth, opening up, and then shin boxing across to the other side. Really tune into your body and feel the difference one side compared to the other. For me, very clearly, I can lift my right knee up more than I can my left knee. Although my left knee is working up, getting a little bit looser as we go through it. So now that we have a sense for how tight both hips are and one being a little bit tighter, we're gonna get the foam roller out and we're gonna work what is called the tensor fascia lata, or the TFL. It is a muscle that attaches to the front hip bone and feeds into the IT band. So we're gonna work on this muscle first. We're gonna do both sides, but I wanna start on the side that felt tighter. So for me, that was my left side. The foam roller is going to go perpendicular with the body. We're going to get into kind of a nice little comfortable modified plank. I'm on my elbows and I'm on my knees. I wanna make sure that we can lift the hips up off the floor and that this is not painful. If this is painful, then I don't want you to do any of these movements on the foam roller. I want you to contact me and schedule a consultation. So at this point, I'm assuming that everybody is not in pain. We're gonna place the foam roller underneath the hip bone of the side that was tighter. So for me, that was my left hip. You're gonna ease that hip bone down and just lightly touch it to the foam roller. We're not placing all of our body weight onto it. From here, see if you can slightly bend that bottom, that hip. Kind of getting, you're just slightly lifting that, moving that knee up so that you get a little crease in the hip. And from then we're gonna move the roller into that crease. It should only have to move an inch or so. That's immediately gonna put us on the tensor fascia lata. From this point, keeping decent tension in the body, we're gonna take some nice deep breaths. As you exhale, we're gonna allow that pressure of where that foam roller to softly melt into that musculature of the TFL. If it's sensitive at all I want is about a 30 to 40% reduction in that sensitivity. We are not looking to get a full reduction. As you feel it melt, we can move about 1 to 3 inches down the leg. I don't want to go very far, so we're only moving a little bit in order to kind of stay on where you feel the most sensitivity. I don't want to be in pain on this. So our pain rules apply 0 to 10. I want to remain under a level 3 with the position of the body as well as with the massage pressure. If you're finding that that pressure is melting and you're not noticing any more sensitivity, the next thing we can do is rotate the top hip up pretty close to parallel to where the hips are stacked, or where the hip's just a little bit forward from the back hip. Or you can bring that hip back down to parallel on the floor. This full array will be getting into particular fibers of that TFL. So we're kind of moving in order to see where is it most sensitive. Can you find the sensitive fibers? When you find those fibers, can you breathe and soften and feel them melt? I want to make sure that we're not holding tension in these muscles. So I don't want the body to be gripping. I also don't want it to be painful. So sometimes the body's kind of gripping hard because we're on something that's really sensitive. So if you're on a spot, we'll take another 2 or 3 breaths. Feel that melting. Again, 30 to 40% reduction in discomfort. And then we're going to come back to our shin box position, where that hip was the one in the back, because that was the position that it was tighter in. And we're going to reassess, just lightly opening up that back hip. Exhale as you lift, inhale as you bring it back. Now, I've already got a nice increase in range of motion. It does not feel quite as tight in this hip. So we can do 3 to 5 reps, and then we're going to bring it across to the other side and do the same thing on both sides. I want to have a good sense of comparison. Notice if this other hip now feels a little bit tighter than the first hip. One of the goals that I want to have for this session is to bring the hips into better balance. So if the hip you worked on first feels really good now and the other hip feels a little tighter, then this is where I would want to bring this foam roller and do the other side hip. If both sides are feeling really even and not, there's no tension difference on one side compared to the other, then I would say it's probably not necessary to work the other side. But for the sake of the video, we're going to go ahead and work the other side today. So we're going to get the foam roller right back out, placing it perpendicular to the body and getting on the opposite side hip. The other thing is, if that one side still feels tighter, let me get into that first before I get on the foam roller. If the same side feels looser, but still excessively tighter than the other side, then go ahead and do a little bit more work on that same side and see if we can get it to balance out a little bit more. Again, for the sake of the class, I'm getting on the opposite side, getting into elbows and knees, placing that hip bone on the foam roller, finding the crease of the hip by bending the hip slightly, and then moving the foam roller into that crease and taking some nice big breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. Allow that hip to kind of soften and melt into the roller, making sure it's not painful. If you're not on a sensitive spot where it feels like you're into something that's good without it being excessively painful, then you can move the body up 1 to 3 inches or down 1 to 3 inches, or you can rotate that top hip up over the top of the other hip or back down towards the floor. I don't want to roll back and forth. I don't want to, I'm not trying to stimulate the muscle. I want to move as smoothly and slowly as possible, because I don't want I don't want the body to start going into protective mode. So anytime you're moving, it's simply to notice where does the sensitive pressure want you to go. And once you get there, you're breathing and you're softening into it. 30 to 40% reduction in discomfort. And again, I want to make sure that you're able to support your body in this position. If you're in pain in the position and you cannot softly get on the foam roller, then this is something I want you to avoid doing at the moment. Again, each time you get a 30 to 40% reduction in discomfort, we're moving to a little bit of a different spot, getting some good melting. Whatever spot you're currently on, nice breath in, out, get that 30% to 40% reduction, and then we're going to come back to our shin box position. So again, shin box, we're going to spend a lot of time here and we're going slow. Since we worked the opposite hip, we're going to get into the opposite side shin box first. And that increased my range of motion on that hip a good amount as well. Nice exhale as you lift and squeeze. Inhale into that crocodile breath as you bring the knee back down. 2 to 3 reps is really all we need to reassess. We'll go back and forth again, checking both sides. I want to notice the difference in tension between each side. I also want to notice, does the tension where it's coming from change? So when I started this, the tension I had was more through the outside front of the hip. But now that feels a lot better as I'm getting more range. I'm feeling the tension through my adductor on the same hip. Now I want to continue to go back and forth a few times in order to compare. Does the right side feel tight in that same area? And it does not really. So if you're still feeling some imbalance just through that TFL area, then we can do a little bit more foam roller work on one side and the other side in order to see if we can get them a little bit more even, although I'm not looking for perfection. At this point, we're going to go into the next movement assessment. We're still kind of looking at the front of the hip. So, and I want to come to that tighter side, which was my left side. So grounding palm, spiraling elbow, lifting up through the sternum, coming back into that nice crocodile breath. Now we're going to scoop the tailbone up and over the top of the other hip. This is the one where we're pushing into the knee where it's in contact with the floor as a pivot point, and seeing if we can scoop the hip up and forward. I'm trying to move my hip bone as far forward as I can. Inhale as you soften back down. Exhale as we try to scoop into it. We're seeing if we can feel this stretch down the front of the hip, really kind of getting into that TFL area or a little bit into the adductor space. And after 5 or so on this side, we're going to come back to the other side and do the same thing. Again, I want to get into my assessment mode. How does this side feel compared to the other side? This side is a little tight, really kind of going through the front of the hip towards the groin, but it's not excessively tight, and I feel like I got pretty good range. Again, we want to go back and forth a few times in order to get sensitive with what are the differences between each side. My left hip still feels tighter than the right hip. Although the mobility is close, as I reach forward, again, I'm feeling this tension down through the inner thigh or the adductor space. So once you've got a good assessment of what you're feeling, which side feels tighter, now we're going to work into the adductors. So with this particular assessment, there's 2 muscle areas that we can potentially work on. One is getting back on that TFL. I'm going to avoid that for the sake of time, but if that's where you're feeling the tightness is more to the outside front of the hip versus the inside front of the hip, then you can work on the TFL on that side for another 1 to 3 minutes. If you're feeling it through the adductor, that's where we're going to go next. So we're bringing the foam roller back out. This time it's going to go parallel to the body. We're coming back onto our kind of modified plank. And we're going to bring, I'm on the wrong side. I want to do my left side. We're going to bend our hip, and I want to bring the knee up so that the hip is at 90 degrees. Real important that we have this 90 degrees. So we got to bring that knee up as high towards the chest as you possibly can. I don't want the knee below the hip. If we get below the hip, you are not going to get on your adductors. You're going to get more on your quads. So this can be a little bit of a challenge, is keeping that knee, that hip at a 90-degree angle. It's real easy to let that leg slide down below the hip. We're placing the knee, the bony part of the inside of the knee, on the foam roller. And again, making sure that we're in a comfortable position that is not painful. From here, we're going to slowly, change my position, roll out, moving the knee over the foam roller so it gets into that adductor space. Now, it's probably going to be fairly sensitive right off the bat, so I want to make sure we're not getting on anything too painful. As soon as you find something sensitive, relax, take some deep breaths. You can even soften your arms a little bit if that helps. Deep breaths. I want to imagine melting butter on a hot knife and feel that melt. And again, all we want is about a 30 to 40% reduction in that melt. As that area starts to melt, we're going to move the foam roller further up the thigh, kind of going into the next sensitive spot. Once you find it, nice deep breaths, soften and relax. Now, if this is feeling pretty good and not overly sensitive, if this is not ramping up into pain into the level 3 range, you can also lightly extend the knee and then let the knee bend and flex and soften. This will kind of work through some of the fibers, which might help you get a little kind of deeper into the groove of those muscles. You can also rotate your toes down towards the floor and then open them back up towards the ceiling. And this is just going to kind of give you some fiber orientation where you're really kind of able to feel like, oh, there's the sensitive fibers. That feels like the spot. When you find that spot, soften and melt and get a 30 to 40% reduction in discomfort. And again, we're going to slowly work all the way up the hip. Now, as we're sliding out, this is where I want to make sure that the knee is remaining up towards the chest and not dropping down below the level of the hip, because that's going to help keep us on that adductor space. And we can take the foam roller as deep up the hip as you can go comfortably. We can really take it all the way up into the groove of the hip as long as we're not pinching on any uncomfortable things. It's good to notice where the sensitive areas are. Is it more sensitive out towards the knee? Is it more sensitive up towards the hip? Different issues in the body are going to show up at different parts of the musculature. For me right now, it's a little bit more distal to the knee than it is up into the hip. So we'll get one more kind of little 2 to 3 breaths, getting a little bit more of that 30 to 40% reduction in discomfort. And then we're going to come back up into our shin box. Grounding through that palm, spiraling that elbow. We're on the side that's more tense. And we're coming right back into scooping the pelvis, reaching forward. Can you feel that same stretch, or does it feel better? Has it opened up the range of motion? I've got a little bit more range. If anything, I'm kind of feeling back into that TFL area is still a little tight. So if I was doing this session on my own, I might be looking at doing a little bit more foam roller on the TFL in order to get better balance through both hips. Again, we're going to do 2 to 3 reps on each side, and we're going to go back and forth. Scooping the pelvis. I want to make sure that I haven't found a new level of tension on this opposite side. So I always want to go back and forth to compare. If it feels better, if you've got improvement, then I want to make sure that we're doing a good number of reps back and forth, at least 5, 10 total reps. You can do 1 at a time, 2 at a time, 5 at a time, or 10 at a time, as long as you're getting the 5 to 10 reps. I want to think about this in terms of we've opened up your range of motion, which means you're going into movement patterns that you haven't been able to, which means you are exploring the neurology of those movement patterns. So this is the corrective level of, I want to teach my body how to maintain this pressure. Once we've gone back and forth on that 5 to 10 times, I also will now want to come back to our opening of the knee 5 to 10 times. Again, checking back in to see if there's any tension differences between the sides. Hopefully at this point you're noticing that both sides are moving better. They may not be perfect, but they're a little bit more in balance. You may also be getting a little bit of like popping, clicking in the hips, especially if they were excessively tight. As long as that's not painful, I would consider that fairly normal. And I've got a decent amount of range of motion that's come back. Again, if you're still feeling a little out of balance, if you're feeling that tension more through the adductors, then get back and do a little, actually we got to do the other leg, don't we? So let's go ahead and go to the other leg because I want to work balance today. So this will be right side, getting back into our modified plank, bringing that knee up, again, high above the hip bone, placing the knee on the foam roller, and then very slowly reaching through so that the knee slides forward over the foam roller and going to where you start to feel some sensitivity. This side will probably feel different than the other side. Where the sensitive spots are going to be a little bit different, and they may not be as intense. Or you may find that they're more intense. That's also a possibility. So getting some nice deep breaths in through the nose, filling up our crocodile breath, exhale, drawing navel to spine, softening and melting. Again, getting that nice 30 to 40% reduction in discomfort. We can come back and apply extending the knee and bending the knee softly, seeing if that kind of gets us some good fiber orientation for where it feels sensitive. And we can also rotate the foot down towards the floor and open it up towards the ceiling. And as we get that 30 to 40% reduction, we're then moving the foam roller a little bit higher up the hip, up the thigh. But again, making sure that we're keeping that knee above the hip and not letting it drop down below the hip. Pay attention to the difference of how the pressure feels on one side compared to the other. I want to get extra sensitive to noticing where am I more mobile, as in how much range of motion do I have on one side compared to the other? Where do I feel tighter? Tighter and mobile don't always coincide. Sometimes the side that you have more mobility actually feels tighter. Sometimes it's the side that has less mobility that feels tighter. So there are two distinctly different things that we're looking at. And then I also want to notice, how does the pressure of the foam roller feel on one side, on the same musculature of one side compared to the same musculature of the other side? That sensitivity is going to give us a lot of information as far as what's going on in the body. So once you've gotten a good 30 to 40% reduction, we're going to come back into our scoops as well as our opening up that back knee. And again, I want to do 5 to 10 on each side. And again, paying attention to, does it feel in better balance than it did when we started? My left hip still feels tighter, but I got much better balance in my mobility. So the range of motion is a little bit similar. And even though it's tighter, things feel a little bit more in balance. So I consider that progress. Sometimes that's the best we're going to get in a session. So now we're going to get in and look at our glutes. So this is where we get into our forward folds. I want to think of the knee as the arrow. We're going to split the knee with our hands and using our hands to square the chest up. So I want to kind of press through the hands and see how square can you get your chest to the floor. Do you feel any tension in your back? Is there a little stretch there? And we're going to send our sternum through the arrow of that knee. Can you move that sternum down towards the knee, keeping square in the chest? And then can we reach both hands slowly forward as we exhale? Inhale, we're going to bring it all the way back up. Exhale, folding forward, nice smooth reach. See how even can you keep your fingers reaching? Inhale, coming back. Exhale for 3 to 5 reps. And then we're going to shin box across to the other side and do the same thing. Using that knee, square the chest. Right off the bat, on this side, I feel more tension in my left hip and a little bit in my low back. Just trying to square, reaching the sternum through the knee, reaching the hands through the knee. Inhale, we're coming back up. Exhale, drawing navel into spine, reaching a little further. Inhale, filling up that crocodile breath as we bring it back up. Doing 3 to 5 reps. And then we're going to go side to side. Now, as we're going side to side, I want to feel, how does that glute space feel on the knee and the arrow side? I also want to continue to feel this back hip because we may want to do a little bit more work here. But for right now, I'm focusing on the glute space as I reach. And see, does one side feel different than the other side as we go back and forth? And if it feels different, where does it feel different? Can you feel greater tension in the back hip of the side that you're reaching to, of the arrow is on? Do you feel it in your low back, or do you feel it in the glute space? You also may feel it in the inside of the front hip that you're folding into. You may get a little pinch in there. That's useful information as well. So kind of notice any of that kind of difference one side compared to the other. And whichever side is the tighter side is the side we're going to focus on next. So for me, it's my right side shin box. I have a little bit more tension in this back hip, but I'm also feeling a little bit bigger stretch through the glute space on my right hip. And so that's where we're going to focus on next. So we're going to grab the foam roller again. We're placing it perpendicular with the body. This is, at this point, we're going to need some pretty decent shoulder strength. It might be helpful to have some pillows or bolsters. I want to get in onto my hands. We're going to lift the hips up and just lightly sit on the foam roller. I'm kind of getting on our sacrum, and I don't want to put all my body weight on it. I want to lightly press. And from here, we're going to change my position. Whichever side was the tighter side, you're going to let both knees roll towards that side so that we're rolling onto one hip. And I really just want to kind of get right on the edge of the sacrum as we get into the really early parts of that glute maximus. So you're probably going to feel some sensitive pressure right off the bat as soon as those knees turn about 20 degrees, which is about where I want to be. From here, we're taking some nice deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. And we can move the hips down and up about 3 inches. I want to remain on that on the edge of that sacrum. I don't want to go down towards the tailbone. I don't want to go into the low back. I'm staying on the hip, and I'm finding where it feels most sensitive. It should feel good. It should feel pleasant. It should feel juicy. It should not be painful. It might be on the pain scale, but not painful. So if it's in that 1 to 2 level, even mildly into the 3, you're probably okay. If you're getting a 3 or above, then I want you to back off and find a less sensitive spot to begin with. And again, nice deep breaths, feeling that tissue melt, soften and melt. And as it does, you're either moving up or down wherever the next most sensitive spot is. And we'll work 2 or 3 spots along the line of the sacrum. And again, this is a good area to kind of notice, where is it most sensitive? Because we're going to do the same thing on the other side, and I want to compare. Noticing where the sensitivity is more gives us some ideas as far as which musculature can be more, it might be playing a role in it. Gives us some ideas of what's going on in the body. For me, mine is pretty high up on the sacrum, kind of going up to the crest of the pelvic bones, before it goes into low back. Again, as you get nice 30 to 40% reduction, you're moving to the next spot. We'll work one more spot, and then we're going to come back and do our folds. So we'll set the foam roller to the side. Since that was my right side shin box, I'm coming back to my right side fold, placing the hands, finding that nice square, which right off the bat, my low back feels less tight. I still feel this left hip, but my back feels a little looser. Exhale as we fold. Inhale as we bring it back up. We'll do 2 to 3 reps, exploring to see if it feels a little better. You have a little bit more groove in your movement. Exhale as you reach. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Again, getting that nice sense of comparison. And I want to notice, like, now is the tension on both sides a little bit more even? Has it moved so that it's more tense on the opposite side, or is it still more tense on the same side? And then we'll come back to our little bit of back and forth. Again, the more we do go back and forth one side to the other, just makes it a little bit easier to get that sense of comparison so that you can really deepen the sensitivity to where you're feeling tighter on one side compared to the other. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and work the foam roller on the opposite side as well. So placing the foam roller perpendicular, lifting the hips up and just lightly setting the hips on the foam roller. Turning the hips about 20 degrees so that we get on the edge of the sacrum. And then from here, we're just lightly rolling up and down about 1 to 3 inches, seeking out where you feel kind of sensitivity. It may not be super sensitive. You may feel just density, might just feel kind of good and pleasant. So wherever you're feeling like a good spot, you can take some nice deep breaths and start to feel that area melt. And as you feel that 30 to 40% reduction in whether, if it's sensitive, it's a 30 to 40% reduction in sensitivity. If it just feels like you're on a mass of tissue, I want to feel that mass of tissue soften 30 to 40% as well, even if it's not uncomfortable or painful. Interesting thing for me is my left side was not the tighter side, but as I'm getting into this musculature, I'm feeling a bit greater kind of density and sensitivity that was not on the right side. It's part of the reason I often want to do balance work through both sides. I don't want to assume that there's not anything to work on the opposite side. Again, we'll work 2 to 3 spots on this side, getting a 20 or 30 to 40% reduction in each spot. Notice if the discomfort or the sensitivity is greater up towards the top of the hips or more down towards the tailbone. I don't actually want to get on the tailbone, but we're moving in those two directions. And once you get that nice 30 to 40% reduction on that side, we'll come back to our folds. Nice inhale, finding our knee arrow of the knee, squaring the sternum. Exhale as we reach. Inhale as we come back to center. Again, 2 to 3 breaths. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. And start comparing side to side. After working that left side, even though I didn't feel it in the left glute, both sides feel a lot more even than they did before. I still feel a little bit more tension through the front of my left hip. So I can probably do a little bit more work on my TFL. The adductors feel a lot better, and my low back feels a lot better. And if you've got improved range, this is where I want to groove the movement in, doing at least 5 to 10 reps on both sides, reaching and exploring, seeing if you can get a little farther with each reach without moving into discomfort or pain. If this feels really good, it would be a good place to add in some like shin box to knees or our hip bridge in order to work more core activation of this same region. Now we're going to switch into a different movement. We're going to get into an inverted, or back into our inverted sit. If this position is uncomfortable, we can modify it by using a chair. From here, grounding palms, spiraling the elbows out, lifting and opening up through the chest, getting nice and tall through the spine. And we're going to work on neck mobility. So you're welcome to let your legs cross at this point as long as you're able to maintain that downward pressure. If you're using a chair, you're going to grip the bottom of the chair and pull instead of pushing. The big thing here is I want to feel the shoulder blades drawing down and back and feeling a nice opening and lifting up through the chest. Sternum's lifting, chest is opening and spreading. Getting nice and tall in the spine. And we're going to do some neck mobility. We're going to check our blind spots. So turning the head from the chin, I want to see how far can you reach your chin over the edge of your shoulder, looking to the left or to the right, and then to the left. We're inhaling into our crocodile breath as we come to center, and we're exhaling, drawing navel to spine as we squeeze that chin over the shoulder. With each one, we're seeing if we can go a little bit further without pain. This is a good one to add in a little bit of jaw mobility on as well. As you reach, you can also open up your jaw and feel like some nice stretch through the jaw. Get sensitive to notice how much range of motion do you have looking to the left compared to the right. And do you feel tightness differences on each side? Now, something interesting about the neck is you may have tightness in both directions, but that tightness might be coming from a different place on each side. So try to be sensitive to notice, A, which side feels tighter, and if they both feel tight, how do they feel tight differently from each other? It's probably not the exact same location. It's probably not the same musculature. So it's a good thing to kind of notice. One, I feel tight high up against the base of my skull. The other side, I feel tight down lower into the clavicle or upper ribs. So kind of notice, where does that tension come from? And you should have a pretty good idea of which side feels a little tighter at this point. We're going to do one other movement. It's going to be our tilts and lifts. So I'm lightly tilting the head and lifting that ear like I'm reaching up towards the ceiling. As I'm doing so, I want to make sure that I'm pressing down through that same side shoulder as I exhale. Inhale, coming to center. Exhale, press and lift. Inhale, center. Exhale, press and lift. Again, notice the difference in range of motion. How mobile do you have? Can you reach further on one side than you can on the other? And where does it feel tighter and more restricted? I got good tightness here on this right side. It's not as much on the left side. I feel it's a little harder to lift my right ear up to the ceiling, and it's more mid to low on my neck. Although I have a little bit of tension that goes up into the base of the skull. Left side feels pretty loose and limber. So we're going to keep that information in mind, and we're going to bring the foam roller out, and we're going to work on a little bit of neck mobility. So we're going to lay on our back, and we're going to place the foam roller underneath the base of our skull. And I want to sit it here as if it's a pillow or a bolster, and I'm just resting my head. I want the occipital bones to be on the foam roller, and the occipital bones are where that nice meaty musculature of the neck attaches to the base of the skull. So really kind of just at the bottom of the cranium or the skull is where we're placing that foam roller. From here, we're going to take some nice deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth, and just allow the body to kind of softly melt into this position. I'm not pushing, I'm not creating pressure. I'm just allowing my head to melt on the foam roller. And as you feel that light melting, we're going to slightly turn the head right and left. This kind of will move so that your head pops onto one side of the occipital bones. So you'll be moving from left side to right side. As you're doing this, notice if one side is a little more sensitive, or it might feel a little thicker, like you're going over a speed bump and the other side feels kind of soft and smooth. More than likely, it's the side that was tighter on your rotation and your neck head tilts that is going to feel a little denser and a little more sensitive. If you're feeling that, go ahead and turn into it. Find that density or sensitivity as long as it's not painful. And we're going to stay there and take some nice deep breaths and allow that pressure to help it melt. Again, 30 to 40% reduction in discomfort. I'm not looking for a complete reduction, which should only take 2, 3, maybe 4 breaths. Once you have that reduction, we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Turning to the other side, it may not be as sensitive, but I still want to get that nice softening and pressure in. And you might be surprised that after a breath or two, you notice a little bit more sensitivity than you thought was actually there. Once you got a 40 to 40% reduction on that side, we're going to bring our head back to center, and we're going to move so that the foam roller moves a little lower on the neck. I want the neck to be supported by the foam roller. I still want the base of the skull to lightly touch the foam roller, but we got a lot more roller underneath the neck. Again, I want to think of the roller as a bolster at this point. And we're going to come right back into looking right and looking left. Just a little bit of a head turn, making sure it is not painful, and feeling that light pressure on one side of the neck, and that musculature of one side of the neck, and then the musculature on the other side of the neck. Again, if this feels uncomfortable, if it feels like it's registering pain at the 3 or above, then I want you to stop what you're doing and schedule a consultation with me. If this is not level 3 or above, notice if one side is denser, more sensitive. Again, denser might feel like you're going over a little bit more of a speed bump. That's the side I want to turn into and put pressure kind of on that density. And then get some nice deep breaths. Exhale. Feel your body melt into the pressure. I'm not pushing, I'm not forcing. I'm just allowing the position of my head to kind of soften into the foam roller. As you get a 30 to 40% reduction in discomfort, we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So turning to the other direction, getting that nice soft melting. Deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. We're still filling up into our crocodile breath on the inhale. Exhale, drawing navel into spine. And as you feel that 30 to 40% reduction, we'll bring our head back to center. We're going to slowly move the foam roller out of the way. And then we're going to slowly roll onto our side, coming back up into our inverted position or getting back into the chair. We're going to find ground palms, spiral elbows open and lift through the chest. And then we're going to reassess our neck, checking our blind spots, seeing how far can you squeeze that chin over the shoulder. Did that improve the quality of the range of motion? Are you able to go a little bit further? Does it feel a little less tension? We'll do 5 up to 10 reps, especially if it feels better. I want to do a few more reps. And then we're going to check our tilts, lifting the ear up towards the ceiling, going side to side, getting that nice grounding through the palm. This feels a lot better, a little bit more balanced through both sides for my neck. My rotation, I feel better rotating towards the right. Still have a little tension going to the left. So I got a little bit more work I can do on that left side. But my lifting the ear up feels a lot more balanced. That actually feels really good. So from here, let's come back to our knees. And I just want to kind of reassess our tall kneel to deep kneel with both the ankles flat and the toes tucked. We did not work through this position a whole lot, but the work through our hips should change how the tension is going down to the knees. So do you feel different down into the knees? Do the quads feel a little bit less tight? Are you able to get a little bit deeper into your hips to heels from your tall kneel down into your deep kneel? Does it feel a little bit more comfortable? In the last little bit, we're going to finish off with our crocodile breath, making our big C shapes in our tall kneel position and getting a good 5 to 6 breaths. Filling up, feel that expansion out. Exhale, squeezing in to create a little bit more resistance. Can you feel that crocodile breath expanding out in all directions? We did not work through the midsection today. This is an area that we can also do a little bit of foam roller work in order to get this expansion. And I'll bring that into a session at some point. But even though we didn't work on it directly, working through the glutes and through the hips should help to get a little bit more expansion through this area. Can you feel that? Can you notice that the area that was harder to breathe into at the beginning of the session is opening up and expanding a little bit more? Doesn't need to be perfect. I'm looking for progress, not perfection. And if you felt some decent improvement, I'd love to hear about your experience in the comment section down below.